Hi, and welcome back to the show. We've been on a bit of a hiatus here over the summer, and Chris Hamilton and I are back once again to annoy you on netcastevent.com and our weekly author interview show. Chris, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kirsten. Good to see you.
Hope you had a great summer. I'm sure it was a nice, refreshing, relaxing one. I think you went down to the States and hung out there for a little bit.
Yeah, Kirsten, it's like we haven't seen each other all summer, right, buddy?
I actually joined him when he was down there. But during that whole process, of course, I've been busy rejigging our show and adjusting a few things based on audience comments. And just wanted to do a quick plug here. We're going to be introducing BizDev Weekly. It's coming up soon. It's going to be Chris and I and guests coming in for shorter increments, and we'll be kind of bantering more back and forth about different ideas for business development. And that's going to be obviously a new addition to our list of shows. If this is the first time you're watching, essentially we broadcast these shows pretty much on a regular basis. It's on demand usually, and we do interview authors from McGraw-Hill. We do those interviews live on Fridays. And today we have Ric Dragon with us. He is the author of Social Marketology. And I'm going to pass this on to Chris, and Chris can can introduce Ric to the interview. Thanks for joining.
Great. Thank you again, Kirsten. And I just want to make one comment, Ric. Thank you, first of all, for being on the show. And secondly, Kirsten noted that you got about the coolest last name that you could really go for, I think.
It is good.
And the best thing is you don't spell Ric the regular way. So, I mean, it's like you've got this distinction now, I guess, of having like the uber cool name, or at least the most uber cool name that we've actually interviewed person with. So that's good.
Well, I don't know, Ric, if you understand the premise of Dragon. In Canada, we have a very popular show called The Dragon's Den. And that's kind of what I'm alluding to. And it's, I think down in the States, what do they call it? They call it Shark Tank. It's a very popular show, and of course it's the Dragons. So you're up there with the tops.
It is interesting. The namesake ancestor of mine, where I got the name Dragon from, came from Canada. So it is a Canadian name.
Excellent. Good plug for Canadians. We always like to plug Canadian stuff. So Ric,
I'll have my beer now.
Yeah, exactly, and your donut.
Thank you.
One of the first things we want to talk about, I'm going to hold the book up here, so hopefully it's got green on it, so hopefully it's not conflicting with the green screen in the back. But we've got the book up here, just showing it off. Usually what we do is we just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, how people can get in contact with you, and then we'll jump into the interview. So if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, how you got started, and a little bit from there.
Sure. Well, I am the CEO and leader of a marketing agency here in New York called Dragon Search, and we do digital marketing. I came from a background of actually web development, application development. I had a company that started well over 15 years ago, so I've been in this field for a long time. About 5 years ago, a partner came to me and said, look, we really need to jump both feet into search engine optimization. And I was like, look, no way. The entire search engine optimization field, the SEOs, they're charlatans, they're snake oil salesmen. I get emails every day trying to sell me these SEO services. But he prevailed. We went into it, and we tried to bring a lot of the process orientation that we did in web and application development to digital marketing. And about that same time, that was the year that Twitter debuted at SMX, and that was the year iPhone was on the cover of Time magazine. So social media was just really becoming a powerful force just that very year. And at that point, we started really saying, well, how do we bring process and process improvement to social media, which is how I've actually come about to end up writing a book about it's a framework for social media marketing process.
Gotcha. And that was actually going to be one of the questions I was going to ask you, is like, how did you actually write the book? What was the genesis of it? But obviously you've just told us that that's kind of how you've led yourself into that.
I woke up every morning very early and worked really hard.
Yes. I'm sure it's not easy to actually write a book.
and run an online marketing company. That can't be easy either.
At the same
Well,
time.
I got a great crew that was very patient with me during the duration, but I will say that writing a book was probably one of the coolest experiences of my life. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, you get to be very creative, obviously, and
It's a learning experience. You know, it's not just spewing out what you know; it's also digging in and expanding on what you know.
So, Rick, you know, as I look at the book and as I was reading the book, you know, there's a lot of stuff that resonates, and especially, you know, what I always look at the social media process, and I'm glad you actually say process as opposed to just social media. People jump in thinking it's a magic bullet, I guess, and that it's going to be the end all cure all of getting sales leads or whatever it is. But what, in your opinion, what kind of companies can use a social media process? You know, I'm sure everyone can, but are there certain companies that cannot use a social media process?
Well, I've actually found from a scalability point of view that even when there's an individual community manager, that if they build their activities on a process, the entire job becomes simpler. So really from the smallest mom and pop business that's doing their own community management, and then of course when you have larger companies with entire teams, you definitely need process. So I've yet to find an instance of where a process is not useful.
Gotcha. The you know, as I go through the book, I mean, you lay out a lot of you know, the process and how to do certain things. One thing that resonated though was you know, goal oriented and as part of that stuff, and goals and outcomes, and how, you know, as a company, I'm sure a CEO would look at social media and say, you know, yeah, I kind of don't get it type thing. But, you know, how is it that an organization can measure success, or what kind of metrics would they put in place to be able to measure success on that sort of stuff? You know, to be able to convey that message to higher ups that may not actually understand that sort of stuff.
That's a great question. In fact, that question is so great, you could probably go out and buy a full couple of cases of beer and we could go out and have a weekend talking about this subject. I mean, it's a rich subject. There's so much to it. Certainly all of us doing marketing have walked into an executive's office and they're like, look, this is what we're doing marketing wise, and we've got to increase sales 10% over the next 2 quarters. It's very, very results oriented, short term, you know, basis. But marketing as a bigger picture can add value to an organization across an entire spectrum. When we look at even pricing premium, if I can charge $1.50 as opposed to $1, that's really a result of brand equity. So we have to look at where social media can contribute to brand equity, not just particular leads. I prefer to think of all of our marketing activities in sort of a balanced scorecard way, so that a portion of our marketing activity is building long-term equity, building value for the brand, and that there's a portion of the marketing activities that are driving sales immediately. So when we look at what social media can do, social media tends to be more valuable in the former part, in building brand equity, building relationships with influencers, key influencers, so that you can get media placement, you know, earned media placement 6 months from now, a year from now. A lot of great magic can happen. But if you're trying to increase sales and you're going to do things like, well, coupons or contests or stuff like that, then you're not really using social media in the way that it's most powerful.
Do you look at it more as a one-on-one communication type scenario as well?
Certainly, certainly. You know, what's interesting is Mark Pritchard, who's a VP of like the world, I think, at P&G, I forget his exact title, came out and spoke that the P&G brands need to go from a broadcast method of marketing to a one-on-one method. He's talking about social media. And for the world's largest conglomerate of brands to be saying that that's what they need to do is very interesting to me. Now, the question we get to is how scalable is it to have one-on-one conversations if you're a B2C, if you're a mass consumer brand? It's very challenging and very interesting ways of doing that, but it can be done.
Any little insight into that? Any kind of secret sauce that you might be able to share with anyone, just how to do that? Just maybe one tip?
Well, you know, the first thing, and I'm sorry to avoid the question directly, because for every organization, how we get value from social media is going to be different. Sure. And a lot of times we say, oh, we're going to do social media marketing, and everybody has the same thing in their mind. Usually, by the way, they're thinking about what we call brand maintenance, which is listening and responding to people talking about your brand or your interest areas. That's only one type of social media marketing, though. There's other types. There's the big splash campaigns, like Old Spice or Pepsi Refresh. There's influencer campaigns where we're really trying to find the influencers in our topic areas so that we can have conversations with them. There's community management. There's brand advocacy or brand ambassador programs, completely different types of things. So each one of these is different and is going to be different for different types of businesses.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that was what I was leafing through the book, and I was going to talk about page 10. You actually list out the 7 different types of social media projects that you can go. And you literally listed off about 4 or 5, but I'm not going to list off the other ones. I want people to actually go and buy your book and read this stuff. But I think you laid it out really well as to how to leverage the social media and what you want to do. I would also I guess it would depend on what your platform of choice would be on that one too. I mean, Twitter's so much different than Facebook, which is so much different from, say, LinkedIn, which is so much different from whatever, right?
And you're going to choose your platforms based on where your communities are. One of the big steps that I go through in the book is identifying what we call micro communities or micro segments. Some marketers have called it hyper segmentation, so that we're not just looking for people who love animals or people who just love dogs. We're looking for that very small group, let's say the Airedale Terrier Fanciers Club in Duluth. Very particular market that we can then reach out and talk to. But when we've done that, it really changes how we can communicate with people.
All 3 of them that are there. The actually interesting you brought that up, because that was a question I was going to ask you about later on. I'm flipping through the book right now because you have a great diagram on that really lays out kind of, you start here and then you kind of move your way through to find out where that little niche is. And I think that's one of the most wonderful things about being online, is that no matter what, you got an audience, right? There's people out there. It's just being able to find that audience.
Right.
Is there any guidance that you would take? There it is. It's on page 95. That's what I was looking at. It's the microsegmenting brainstorming, and how would someone go about trying to target or figure out what that micro niche market would be?
So in fact, we talk about a brainstorming because we have found the brainstorming technique to be the most valuable in uncovering micro audiences. So we get out the whiteboard, we clean it off, make it all sparkling, and we get several people in the room. If we're working on behalf of a brand, often, of course, we'll have the CMO and other representatives, brand managers or product managers of the brand in the room. And we start thinking about, as a central premise, who cares? Why should anybody care? And we start with that central premise, and we start finding that we can break off from there. We were doing one program for a very large nonprofit that focused on helping musicians, for instance. And the essential premise was very challenging at first because, well, who cares about music? Everybody cares about music. But once we started thinking about, well, who would care about musicians? There's people who make instruments. There's people who make cases for instruments. There's people who do, book shows or create records, audio engineers, all of these different people. And at one point, because of the people in the room, we were actually able to dive in and find other groups. Sometimes we'll use keyword research, the type of keyword research we might use in pay-per-click advertising or in search engine optimization. And that keyword research around a topic will often suggest other people that we didn't think about. So in any way that we can think about other small groups of people, it becomes a basis for this brainstorming. And then the brainstorming becomes a document. And that document is almost like this thing we carry around throughout the social media project campaign for the next year. And we're going to add to it. We're going to subtract from it. And we're going to go through, iterate through these micro audiences, trying to find out where we can actually connect with communities and have an impact.
Gotcha. The one of the things I loved in the book, and I love this phrase, it's the herding cats, chapter 3, which is how do you, first of all, how do you pick the people for the roles, and how do you put the policies in place? And I mean, I'll give you an example. I have a company that keeps contacting me all the time. It's a great company. I'm not going to list it because I don't want them to be embarrassed online here, but literally they are reaching out to me with several different people, and I have to keep going back to them and say, guys, I'm already talking to your chief sales officer right now because
Right.
we're engaged. And I have to keep going back to their chief sales officer and say, do you know, these guys are, you know, literally running at me almost every day. And so you got to get this under control. But I mean, that just is a prime example of how do you actually get the right roles in place? How do you manage that process? What's your take on that one?
Well, there's two different topics in what you just brought up. One is the concept of a CRM in social media, or what people often call social CRM. So it's one thing to be able to use a good old traditional CRM like, you know, Salesforce or Microsoft CRM or any of the others that are out there. And as salespeople, as we're calling people to keep track of them, and ideally in an organization, if I call you, then Mary down the hall should be able to see immediately that I called you, and in fact what our last conversation was about, right? Isn't that the dream?
Yep.
Now, what if we were also having conversations on Facebook or LinkedIn? Wouldn't it be fabulous if Mary could also see that? So that's the concept of a social CRM. Now, when we talk about a social media marketing team and the different roles that are involved with that, that's a little bit different in how we sort of manage our work. We may find, for instance, in doing what we call community management, that Jillian is fabulous over here on Twitter, but we're going to use Joe on Facebook. But they're going to need to speak with one another fairly frequently, at the end of every day or even during the day, like, oh, look over here what I was able to accomplish, and for us to be able to see each other's streams. Now, there are tools being developed. We have, even at this organization, I think we have reviewed more than 24 tools. We have not found the magic silver bullet yet. We're still looking for it. They're being developed by a lot of companies, but it's still a nascent field.
I was going to say I could imagine my head imploding just trying to manage that that kind of level of information flow. I mean, that's and high fives to anybody who actually can figure that one out. I think that would be
you must have you must need a substantial team of listeners in order for that to work. Unbelievable.
Well, yeah, people get focused on the mediums that they're involved with usually, so it's not usually that complex. You've got your different ecosystem, if you will. I mean, we create a blog, and a blog for a company is a little bit like managing your own magazine. Imagine that your company was putting out Time magazine, and this is your Time magazine. And the difference is it's not monthly, it's continually flowing. That feeds into Facebook and Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever other social media marketing platforms that we're using. So, you know, if someone's a community manager for a particular community, they can kind of work that flow. It's not that complex.
Gotcha. The other thing that I love, and I just talked about it a little earlier with you, was the fact that you put goals, or you talk about envisioning the results or putting the goals in place. And I am such a big fan of people putting goals in place, just because of the fact that without a goal, I mean, you just meander, right?
Sure.
How would you take a look at I guess what would you recommend as being goals that organizations can kind of accomplish? And I know that's kind of a how long is a piece of string question, but maybe you can think of just an example and just kind of share it with us on maybe a client or something like that.
Well, actually what we've been doing, and we've developed a spreadsheet that we've been using as a tool that has tabs for different aspects of the business. So we talk about the high level of the business. And I really, as a marketer, I want to understand that, let's say this business is seeking to be number one in its market, and they may have a very high level sense of purpose. Some organizations do. So, you know, Coke is really about creating a happier world. You know, there's a lot of things like that are very critical, even though they're soft and fuzzy. Then we get down into more particulars. Coke is also out to double its revenues by 2020. That's important to know. So those are very high-level business objectives, and we try to map out as many of those as we can. Some organizations are using Net Promoter Score. We want to know that. Any aspect that's a high-level business goal, we want to understand.
Gotcha.
Then we go into more generic marketing or even web metrics. We want to talk about web traffic, bounce rate, engagement rate, or things on the blog. Then we can actually bring it down to a particular platform. We can also have an influencer campaign. Let's say we want to be having conversations with 50 high-level influencers in our industry. How can we map that? what do we call a high level? We can grade our influencers on a scale of 1 to 10. We can also grade the level of interactions we have. If Chris Brogan retweets me today, Chris is very influential in online marketing. Fabulous. Thanks, Chris. That might be, he might be a level 10 influencer, but the retweet is only a level 3 action. On the other hand, if Chris blogs about my book next week, then I've got a level 10 interaction. That's fabulous. So there's a lot of scoring that you can develop around these different things. Ultimately, we want to get away from the dumber metrics, the metrics that the systems just spit out, like, oh, you've got 5,000 followers. That's great. That's important. But what I really want to get down to is actually how many interactions and conversations I have with people within those communities.
That's excellent points that you actually put forth there. It's when I think about it is I'm going to deviate here for a couple of secs, but then we'll come back into the book. But where would someone get started doing this? Like, I mean, you don't necessarily have to look at it as an individual. You could look at it as a corporation. But what would be kind of a first step for someone to get started in going down a process of doing a social marketing?
Well, the fabulous thing is, and we map that out in social marketology, that there is a very clear, concise sort of step-by-step that you can do, identifying your desired outcomes or your goals and objectives and your vision and all of this, to finding out where your markets are, who your brand is. You really can take all these steps and ultimately from that start to create a social media marketing plan. However, there are 3 things that you really need to do no matter what. And so if we're going to talk about getting started, doing a really robust listening plan, using some tools, whether they're free or paid, to really know what the market or people within social media are saying either about your brand, your competitors, or your subject matter, your passion points. So I want to be listening. That's first. The other thing I want to do is I really want to make sure that I get out there and I own whatever real estate I can. And when I say real estate, I mean social media profiles. It's important to make sure that you have ownership of your profile names on Google Plus and Facebook, everywhere in social media, and that they're branded appropriately, whether you're going to be on social media or not. And finally, the third thing is you need to have social media policy. Because if your organization is being a little slow about jumping into social media, it doesn't mean that Fred down in sales hasn't started that Facebook page and is doing something. So you really need that policy. Now, when it comes to creating policy, there are thousands of fabulous examples freely available on the web. Great starting point.
Excellent. You brought up a couple of things: the listening and also policies. We'll get to the policies or some of the stuff in the back end here, which is what you don't want is rogue people running around your organization, representing you and doing bad things. And I'm trying to remember the example you gave in the book. Was it someone from, was it American Red Cross or something like that? They talked about getting a 12-pack and drinking.
That was a beautiful example, and I love that example for various reasons. I mean, Red Cross is such a wonderful organization somebody in their staff, put out a rogue tweet. It was an accident. They were using the wrong software. And that's something you really need to watch out for. If the company's using something like Hootsuite, you want to make sure that people aren't also using it for their individual accounts. But the great thing was this individual put out this tweet saying, hey, we just found another 6-pack of Dog's Head beer. We're getting slizzard. Now, the beauty of what happened there, the absolute beauty, pure genius, was the head of marketing or digital marketing at Red Cross immediately, or after some midnight phone calls, got on there and said, everybody don't worry, the person who put that tweet out, we've taken their keys away, everybody's safe here at Red Cross. So in other words, they handled it with humor.
Yeah.
Whereas what we've seen in other organizations where something bad happened, they handled it with misinformation or trying to delete something, trying to sort of cover things up. And that's the worst thing you can do on social media, because if people feel that you're being disingenuous or anything less than honest, you lose all credibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, this whole world's transparent, right? So
they want that transparency. Totally.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
The one thing I was just talking about just before that is the listening. So we had, I think it was Adam Metz, who's also a fellow McGraw-Hill author, came on, and he gave, I mean, his whole thing is social CRM and talking about stuff. So I don't know if you've ever talked to Adam or met Adam. He's a great guy.
Sure.
He was talking about the listening aspect of things. What can you recommend for somebody for listening? I mean, my personal belief, before we get into it, is people are giving you their innermost feelings online sometimes. And that is, I mean, for market research, that's amazing, right? And there is such a huge opportunity for companies to harness that and be able to build relationships. You know, what would you use as a listening tool? What could you recommend for someone maybe to start out as a listening tool, or maybe a more powerful one? And how could people get started listening?
So the easiest, cheapest thing for very small organizations, of course, is Google Alerts. It's free, google.com/alerts. Very simple to set up alerts on your brand name or certain topics, and they come to you as emails every day. That's easy. Once you've graduated past that point, you really are looking at too many signals. If you're a much larger organization and there may be, you know, thousands of mentions of your brand name a day, it's just not feasible to track those things manually like that. Then you get into what's called sentiment analysis. Now, sentiment analysis is when a computer program is sort of sifting through that, and if they're seeing certain word patterns, it might suggest that you have some negative tweets, for instance, or, you know, social mentions. Or it can see that you have some positive or neutral. We'll try to grade these things to help you sift through them. They're not 100% accurate. You know, somebody can say, wow, that show was bad, and mean that it was fabulous. Or, you know, somebody can say nice in a way that it actually means anything but that, right? So the machines aren't perfect, but they're a nice way to help filter through that. And there's a lot of great tools. Radian 6 is very popular. Sysomos, Brandwatch, it goes on and on.
Hootsuite, obviously, you said Radian 6, good Canadian company. We've got to put the plugs in. We also have Hootsuite, good Canadian company, which, you know, we have to plug the Canadians as well here because we feel so inferior against the U.S. sometimes. But I'm going to get back to the kind of the egg on your face, which I believe is one of the last chapters or one of the final chapters in the book. And what would be the biggest recommendation that you could make to avoid the gaffes that may come up in social media? And I'll give you an example. I had some guy tweeting against me online that if his company knew he was actually ranting on me the way he was, it was defamatory, first of all.
Sure.
I mean, it could have launched a lawsuit. I'm not into that stuff, but you know, if it were someone else, it could have potentially launched a lawsuit against this company, right? How do you keep that stuff under tabs? How would you do that stuff?
Well, you know what's fabulous is so much of what we do in business comes down or comes back to these very basic principles. You know, an organization having a sense of purpose and vision, an organization having a very strong culture. These things are so important. And of course, if you haven't shared your culture in your organization well, or you haven't hired based on culture, you're going to end up with people. And it's not a social media problem. It's truly an HR problem. If I've got somebody who goes online and rants, you know, as a racist or saying some other crazy things online, I've got a hiring problem. So part of it is training people in my organization so that they know how to reply. We have a very strong part of our training here. We don't go negative at this company. I'm absolutely opposed to going negative. If you went on Twitter today and started talking trash about me, I would probably very gently try to pass it on. Let's just avoid this. I won't even engage it necessarily. Now, so training is a component which goes back to policy as well. Having the tools for listening, making sure you know what's going on, that's very important. And then finally, once you have all those things in place, and things can still go bad, you can have policy, you can have training, and some rogue employee goes on in the middle of the night and does something horrible, then you need a response plan. How do you respond to these things? And that's a little bit of traditional PR. You know, there's times where it's appropriate to go on, and if anybody has been truly hurt by the action, you need to get out there and apologize quickly and take ownership for what happened. The other aspect is, you know, if somebody is out there being a troll, and meaning somebody who is just out to cause trouble no matter what. You have to identify that as opposed to somebody who truly has a concern and doesn't understand. If somebody doesn't understand, then you're going to educate them. If somebody truly is a troll, you really need to somewhat avoid the situation. It's not going to help to engage them sometimes. So there's a lot of different moving parts there. That's
all great advice. It's almost like you know what you're talking about there, Rick. But it is what I'm honing in on too is it's almost like a golden rule, right? Just treat others how you'd like to be treated.
Yes.
And don't and if you did hurt someone's feelings, obviously own up to it and
you're getting back to the core values of society, and
yes.
it's almost like the great equalizer.
Well, yeah. The unfortunate part also with online is it's anonymous a lot of the times, right? So it's very much like you could rant on someone, but you would never go up to them in person and rant on them the same way.
There is that, and there's also something that I don't love is there's been a culture of snarkiness to emerge from social media, where people are like, well, I'm just being honest. This sucks. And, you didn't need to do that. You didn't add to the value of the world by doing that. And yet some people think they are. It's unfortunate.
I think if you're gonna call out something like that and say this sucks, you should have an alternative. Say maybe you should think about this type thing, right? I've always said that to people: is don't come to me with problems, come to me with a problem and a solution to that problem, right?
Exactly, and that's going to get back to your real brand identity.
Yeah.
Who is your brand? And if your brand is wanting to be the world's friend, or be friendly, or be a trusted resource, all of these things, then how does snarkiness necessarily help that brand attribute?
Absolutely. By the way, I'm not going to go into any more on the book. I do like the book. I think it's an amazing book that would be it's the Bible of basically putting up your social media program. I'm holding it up here again. We're going to get into some just off-the-cuff questions for you, if you don't mind, and
sure.
Nothing that's going to make you freak out or anything like that. But I am holding the book up. Do you have a picture of it there,
Yep.
Kirsten?
Yep.
Great. I highly recommend if your organization or even as an individual going to look and undertake this. There is a clear path and plan in here, and Rick spells it out very well in this whole thing. By the way, as I'm holding it up, I see you got another great Canadian on the back here. Mitch Joel actually wrote some stuff for you. We like to out Canadians wherever possible, right? And hook them up. So
some of my favorite trips are to Toronto and Montreal.
Oh well, you just hit Kirsten's from Montreal, and originally I'm from Toronto, so
that's my hometown. Good old Montreal.
Yeah. One of my most favorite places in the world, by the way, is New York. One of the things I'm going to start with here is a guy from New York who you may know, Dave Kirpin. Do you know Dave from Likeable Media?
I do. Dave's a great guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, New York, there's only about 5 or 6 guys there, so you got to run into one another every once in a while. He had one of the best sayings that we ever heard was give me some of that there social media or something, somewhere in that way. I'm not paraphrasing it exactly. But his whole concept behind it was that, guys, and I brought this up a little earlier, guys go in from organizations and they think that because they got a Facebook page, because they got a Twitter account, because they've got a LinkedIn profile, because they've got all this stuff, that the floodgates open and everything's there. What they don't understand is that it's rules of, you got to engage, you got to join a conversation and all that sort of things. When someone is first getting into social media, and it may not be corporately, but it just may be on their personal thing, what would you recommend be the first tool that they look at?
Well, the main 2 tools, of course, the big 2 players or the big 3 players are certainly Facebook and Twitter, and Google Plus is still a player. Some people don't think it is viable. LinkedIn is yet a whole nother game. But certainly, Facebook is fabulous for making connections, or deepening the connections you already have, what we call strong connections in network theory. So you have family and friends, and it's a great way of reconnecting and strengthening those ties. And then Twitter, you go on Twitter and you find the 5 or 10 most interesting people in the world in your subject matter. That's a fabulous opportunity. So I can find, for instance, who are the top 10 most people in digital marketing that I want to connect with, go out and find them on Twitter and start following them. So I can actually, you know, one of the people I love, or the couple of people I love in this field, is I mentioned Mark Pritchard at P&G and Jonathan Mildenhall at Coca-Cola, who's chief creative at Coke. Brilliant people. I love following them. What a great opportunity. And I've actually been able to have conversations with them as a consequence.
I love Twitter. I still am trying to figure Facebook out, but that must be because I'm in my mid 40s and I'm not a conversationalist at heart all the time. That sort of stuff. Hey, where do you see social media going? I mean, it's interesting how you watch over the last few years how it's completely changed. But
I do have an idea about that. But first, I would preface it with the notion that, for me, I really do believe that social media represents a revolution in communications that we haven't seen since they developed the printing press. And when they developed the printing press, that overthrew governments in Europe, and entire religions were formed, and the world was never the same, basically. It really had a profound effect on the world. And this is what I see, that social media and the internet combined, the effect that they're having has completely changed the way we do business, and most certainly has changed the way we do marketing. So 20, 30 years ago, we did marketing segmentation, was very broad, and we broadcast to people, and it was primarily one way. And today what we're talking about is not broadcasting, but having one-on-one conversations with very niche markets. It's completely changed, and people are talking back to us. They're telling us what they want and what they care about, and if we're having conversations with them, we can be a part of that, and it's, you know, fundamentally changes everything. There will be organizations that embrace it and flourish, and there will be organizations that are very slow to take it up or try to use it in the old model, and I don't think that they will flourish.
Yep.
And now, as far as the crystal ball part, when I pull that part in, what I see happening is what I call a social media panopticon. And a panopticon is a condition in which you can see everything at the same time. And what people can do is you're visible all the time, wherever you are in social media. So I get a LinkedIn newsletter that tells me that Dave is reading this book and Mary's watching this movie, and by the way, got a new job last week. Really getting a deeper insight into people. The other thing that's happening is right now we've got the major platforms that are like the big armies at the end of, you know, Lord of the Rings trilogy. They're on the battlefield, they're about to clash, right? We've got Google Plus and Facebook, or Google going at it with Facebook. Huge clash happening. However, what's going to happen is ultimately you won't know you're on social media. Social media will become all pervasive. So wherever you are, it'll be built into it. And already, of course, Facebook and Google have been doing that. Facebook has been doing that with their open graph. So if I'm listening to a piece of music, it's shared on my wall. I can be using some other app. I can even be on my treadmill. It can be shared to my wall. Google Plus is doing a lot of that. So it all becomes integrated, and you won't even know that you're on a social media platform.
Well, it's almost that ubiquity of everything kind of converging. And mind you,
Precisely.
as the tools become more convenient for all of us and integrated into our day-to-day lives and tied into all of our surroundings, of course, then that becomes more and more obvious. Then there are the privacy advocates, obviously, that consider that to be a threat. What's your take on that?
They're right. There's real dangers there, and society is having to sort of refigure out a lot of things. At the same time, we've got new generations of people who they were born with it. They knew what the internet was when they were born. There's going to be people who don't remember a time before Facebook, and the millennials are treating social media completely different than those of us who are, let's say, in our 40s.
It's a huge shift, obviously, in culture as well.
I think the sharing of information. The one story I've got on that is when I put Netflix on and it shares it to my Facebook timeline or whatever it is. Which I'm sure if anyone looks at it and doesn't realize I have kids, they're going to see I look at the Backyardigans all the time and Max and Ruby, and of course, you know, they're going to think I'm sort of weirdo or something like that.
Well, and that's a bit of a mistake by to be honest, Netflix. I think Netflix is really doing a disservice by not clarifying that. They're kind of jumping a little bit ahead of the gun there because that's not accurate. and under one account. I think in my case, it's the same thing. You know, it doesn't truly represent what I watch and what my view habits are.
Yeah.
So there, I think
messy.
they're kind of doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's messy, but at the same time, life is messy. So that if I know you and I see, you know, the backyardigans up, sure, I kind of know that you have kids and that that's all part of it. So I think that that's all right.
Yeah, the problem is I have no kids and I just watch the Backyardigans because I'm lonely. I'm joking. I have 3 young kids. So what are some of the innovative ways that companies can use social media? Any tips or tricks that you might have on that? Not giving secret sauce away, but just something that they could do to further their cause. And you know what? That's, once again, I often ask how long are piece of string questions. That one, let's take a look at how would they use it to generate sales leads potentially.
Well, and okay, so those are 2 huge different questions.
Yeah.
Completely different. When we talk about sales and social media, one of the things that I'm very excited about and I like thinking about, you know, I do come from a time when we had that good old-fashioned sales process or sales funnel. And you were like, okay, Fred, you've got to make your 50 cold calls today. And out of those cold calls, you're going to end up getting agreement for 5 meetings. And out of the 5 meetings, you're going to get 1 contract. You know, there was some form of process there that we used to do with sales. That would not work in social media. That would be so fundamentally flawed in social media. But what can we do? I could, for instance, say, well, let me help 10 people a day in social media on my subject matter expertise. Let me be helpful. Let me count that. So great, I was helpful to 10 people. And after a period of time, I want to say, you know, after a period of time, I actually want to meet in real life 5 of those people that I helped over there. So we could create a funnel. And out of those people that I meet in real life, I'm actually going to have maybe common ground of doing business with and share some business knowledge and my company's expertise with those people. And you might say, wow, that sounds all very fine and we can sing Kumbaya and hold hands and sprinkle fairy dust. Is that really going to generate business? Now, I've done it. We do it at this company. We have been growing at a rate of about 40% a year. Half of our growth last year I can attribute to activities from Twitter. Doesn't mean that I was on Twitter and somebody saw a tweet I wrote and said, wow, I got to call you up and send you a check. It never worked like that. What it was is I met people. I was helpful with people. I believe in paying it forward. I met people offline that I'd met online. We deepened our relationships and they became business.
That's actually, you know, you think about it. I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking about that going, wow, that's, you know, to be able to help somebody because they reach out on Twitter like, how do I get this? How do I do this? Right. Sure. And to be able to go out and just say, hey, here's something that can work. Right.
Well, the first thing is to make yourself approachable. Nobody's going to approach you if you don't open up, you know, what you like to call it, open up the kimono, Chris?
Yeah.
Essentially, you have to be able to show people that you're real and approachable, and then they'll ask the questions, and then you respond. And, of course, it's all open, right?
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing is how when you look at the science of influence, if you will, why are people influenced by one person as opposed to another? Why are they willing to write a check to company A and not to company B? And the science of influence is extremely complex. It is not simple. It's not as simple, say, as a clout score by any means. However, we do know that a major component of influence is expertise and authority, trustworthiness. So if I'm consistent in my message and my brand, that's an aspect of trust. If I share knowledge, you're going to come to trust the knowledge that I share with you. So that has a very strong component of influence as well.
So, Rick, here's one question, and it's actually led from a question that I saw here in the in a personal message here on the website. It was regarding hiring people from foreign countries to manage your social experience or your social interaction with public, and obviously that can get you into some hot water if they don't understand the core values, as you mentioned, of the company. But what about, so you're saying integrate the social media experience with everyone in all tiers of communication in the company, as opposed to farming it out.
Certainly. And that doesn't mean you cannot farm out aspects of your social media. I mean, of course, my organization does do social media marketing on behalf of a lot of brands out there, and we do it very effectively. We also work with people internally to get the most value from those people. But if you have people in the organization that are already communicating through various channels, and you can actually create an organization that is in its DNA more social, then you're going to be so much ahead of the game. You may still use an outsourced resource to help complement what you do.
So you said you manage some bands, do you?
No, brands.
Oh, brands. I thought you said bands. I was just say, wow, that's kind of cool, actually. Hey, sorry to sidetrack there. We're getting close to the end here. Now, there's always a question I ask the authors at the very end, and it is, what is the best piece of advice that you could give as it relates to, in essence, what the book is about, which is your social marketology and the whole process there. What's the best piece of advice? And if it's not just one, you can give us 2 or 3 if you want.
Sure. Well, the fundamental essence of the book, and the reason why when I embarked on writing a book on social media, there's a fun little story. And stop me if we don't have time.
No, we got tons of time. We could be here all day.
So I met who later on became my acquisitions editor at the publishing company. And when we first met, we had a great conversation, some great serendipity, actually happened through a real life meeting. And she said, well, what is your book about? And I told her, and she said, the problem is we have so many books on social media and social media marketing. We want to do a book with you, but it can't be that. And sort of looking at the whole field of, there's so many books on social media, there's so many books that are evangelical or very tactical in nature. But what we saw that was particularly missing was a book about a process, that what we're doing in this very nascent field is so very ad hoc. We're doing what I call throwing spaghetti up against the wall to see if it's finished cooking. I actually dated a girl who did that. A messy kitchen. But the problem is so many businesses and even larger brands are sort of, hey, let's try this in social media and let's do this. And they're sort of doing things ad hoc. They haven't developed a system and a process. And my biggest piece of advice is that you can bring process. Process doesn't have to be a dirty word. There's a whole world out there of people who embrace Six Sigma or lean marketing or agile marketing. All of these things are agile processes, and they're about customer centricity. All of this can be brought into this great world of social media marketing as well. And that's fundamentally what the book is about.
Ric, it's absolutely interesting, all the stuff that you were talking about here, and very insightful and lots of valuable information. I am going to give your website here. It's dragonsearchmarketing.com, where you've got a lot of information on there as well. The other one, too, is the book that I'm holding up right now. Should I put it in front of my face? You don't like it when I put it in front of my face. I don't mind, because I just hide my ugly mug.
The social marketing.
We'll have a link on Netcast event for purchasing the book, and also on my website when I put the snippets of the blog or the interview up on it. And now, because you've been so gracious with your time, is there anything you want to plug apart from the book, or anything like that that you want to let people know about, or how can they contact you once again?
Well, I love hearing from people. One of the best parts about writing a book are the conversations that happen afterwards. And some of them are heated disagreements. That's fabulous. I don't have a problem with that. I actually like that. I think that there is a lot of basis for discussion. Love hearing from people. So feel free to join me on Twitter, Ric Dragon, Ric Dragon at Twitter, or hit me on the website or on Facebook, anywhere. I'd love to hear from people and continue the conversation.
Awesome. By the way, you were bang on with all these guys that write books on social media. We get so many. I look at them, it's like they're all a rehash of one another. You just it's a generic. You could almost write the generic, here's the book, right? So, but that is definitely, yours is so much different because of the fact that you do go through a process and a methodology, right? So.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Excellent. Ric, once again, we greatly appreciate your time being on the show today. Stay on afterwards so we can talk to you for a couple of minutes. And once again, go to dragonsearchmarketing.com. Connect with Ric. Ric, what's your home number so people can call you at 1 or 2 in the morning?
I'm sure the phone would be running on, constantly.
Constantly, exactly.
By the way, you can actually reach me often quicker on Twitter than any other way.
Really? Okay. So at Ric Dragon on Twitter, and that's the perfect way to get a hold of him. Once again, thank you, Ric, very much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. I learned a ton out of this today.
Yeah,
and I always do that. I always appreciate when authors come on and share their knowledge like that.
And such a high level, too. That's fantastic.
Exactly. If anyone has any questions, comments.
I basically distilled the 2 questions that came in and forwarded them on to Ric. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining. Awesome. We appreciate your participation, involvement, and we do thank you again, Ric, for spending time this Friday to spend some time letting us know and sharing your brain. Thanks everyone for joining.
Chris.
Thank you.